right, welcome back to another edition of AGI Schools Out Saturdays, where we talk about preparing young people for their future, not our past. And sometimes we get to talk to some of those young people. Oftentimes they're Boilermakers. Both of my kids graduated from Purdue University, and LinkedIn is my favorite platform. Matter of fact, it's the only platform I really pay attention to. And one day I came across this in my feed, a picture of a young man standing there here with a sign that says, "Can AI do this?" Purdue Computer Science Junior looking for an internship. And I said, that is awesome. I have got to get a hold of Ethan Dawes. I get him on the show. So, Ethan, awesome LinkedIn post, man. Tell us a little bit
Thank
about
you.
yourself.
All right, so you basically said it all. I'm a junior, just finished all my exams. Feels good. It goes quick too. So this was just an idea a friend of mine proposed to me, and he was like, "Hey, I've got a job, but you should do this because you still need an internship. Go to Chicago with a sign, stand outside Union Station." I was on Adam Street. I also tried the other one, but I found most success with Adam Street because people got that one the most. And I was kind of like there saying silly, goofy things. Can an AI major do this? Can an AI do this? Um, so I got some smiles. I got some people walking up, scanning the QR code. At the end of it, I was a little actually discouraged because I'm like, oh darn, only 4 people like connected on LinkedIn, but really the most people like yourself connected after I made the LinkedIn post, which was the really surprising. I'm like, wow, this was actually really effective and it worked. Um, Yeah, basically, I got some funny responses. I got someone who was like, AI is the future, you need to get on board with it. I got some people who were like, a lot of the people who did reach out to me were like worked in like human resource. Like I got a recruiter who reached out. I got people in like who was in legal and they're like very, still very people based divisions. And in terms of outcomes, I unfortunately still don't have an internship, but we make the most of it. I still think it was beneficial. I got these cool opportunities. I'm currently in talks with like a startup founder about like joining one of their projects, so it's not totally bad.
That's cool. I mean, I totally think that the person who said AI is the future, get with it, is missing the whole point. Like, yes, AI is the future, but computer science people are like a big necessary part of that future. That's one of the things that I'd love to talk to you about because
Hmm.
I think that some of the scare about lack of jobs in computer and data science are from just looking at the landscape of big companies, and particularly tech companies like Amazon or Facebook or someone who has a degree in one of these, thinking about their future as, I'm going to get out of college and I'm going to go join a big team of other people who write code and mitigate data and things like this. And those jobs, at least temporarily, there has been kind of a freeze on. A lot of those companies are using AI to kind of do some of that entry level work, but there are so many small to medium sized businesses who who want to leverage AI in their business and have absolutely no idea how to do so, who could really use someone who can understand code to help them navigate that future.
For sure. Um, Definitely, I do know it's like it's hard because you see those big companies like, wow, they're so big, they have so much impact, and I think personally, I part of me is also kind of like I do want to work for one of those big companies, but really I just want to have an impact. So anything I can do where it's like, helping out, I feel like that is something I'll enjoy.
We're gonna put up a bunch of clips and links to you, and we'll put that QR code up. I'll actually put it on the on the thumbnail for this. So I hope that this lands you a job. I j-
Thank you.
let's let's dive in first, okay? Because your
Yeah.
ingenuity is what impressed me, right? So I know, and I've heard people. I'm 52 years old. I have kids your age. I have a kid younger than you, and I've heard people in the middle talking about, well, I just can't get people to look at my resume. And I'm like, okay, admit right now that resume is not the best way to go find a job, to just be putting out resumes. Because you're generally what people are doing is taking large language models, optimizing their resume to the job description, and then sending it to a company whose AI reviews it. And it just like this circle is just going around where AI is dancing with AI. And you have to get a little more ingenuitive, and that means being on LinkedIn. That means going to events. That means going and doing crazy stuff like going to Chicago. Like, do you see a lot of other young people embracing those ideas, or are they all still kind of on the hamster wheel, just trying to throw out resumes?
I really think the people who are like on LinkedIn connecting are few and far between. Um, I think what really was the shift in my mindset, because I was also like this until like very recently, was I went on a spring break trip with Purdue where we met a bunch of executives and kind of like networked with them. And that was really like, oh, you can get like a lot of places with this Purdue degree and these Purdue connections. And so, like, I definitely know people who are, especially like when you're looking up online and it's like so much contradictory, like, you should personalize, you shouldn't personalize. Like, I've even considered doing like that AI resume personalization. And I might do it. It's like, you know, if you have, I think you should use all the tools at your disposal. So, networking, resumes, and like make a complete picture as opposed to just like focusing on one and being like, why is it not working?
Yeah,
Well, it's because you're just trying one thing.
yeah, that's a
And
really good point.
so, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, no, go ahead, man. I didn't
Okay.
mean to.
Um, yeah, people of the peers that I've talked to, I think most of them like do express this frustration with just mass applying. And there's like one student I talked to at our CCO who was like, oh yeah, I'm like reaching out on LinkedIn, like cold connecting. So yeah, few and far between.
And you do get every once in a while, anybody who has a LinkedIn membership will get an offer for premium, and which allows you to like use or an offer to use Sales Navigator. I will say one of the things that AI is awesome at. So I just created a website for this podcast, right? And I'm not a website
Mhm.
designer. I do not write code at all. I've been a no code chief AI officer. I've found my space in AI without writing code. I would say if I had your skills, I would be even better and way further ahead. But the thing is, like, I don't spend a lot of time just vibe coding per se, because a lot of times that is spinning up something that is cool as a prototype, but it's not really very functional beyond personal use. But using the browser extension with Claude, like, so if you were to get a free membership for LinkedIn and be able to use Sales Navigator for a month to connect with people, right? Like, you don't have to go through the training videos and everything else to figure out how to leverage that to find a job. You can just open up the browser extension and be like, "Hey Claude, this is what I'm trying to do. Start doing it in here." And it will manipulate it and ask you for a thumbs up once in a while for a plan, and then just keep going. And that has been really cool.
Okay, that's actually really interesting to think about. I've known that was an option, but I've always been skeptical personally of the AI browsers because they feel like a lot of hype as opposed to utility. Because I'm just like, well, I can just click through. And also, I've heard they're like expensive in terms of tokens. So, like, how has your experience been then?
Well, I have the $100 a month account, right?
Okay,
With Claude. So, but let me share my screen again, because
yeah.
I want to kind of demonstrate how much I have gotten the use of that just building this website. So this is the website.
Yeah.
We'll go to the main landing page, right? So it starts off with "The School's Out," which is the staple podcast of my podcast network, and then goes down. It has a sign up for the new newsletter that I've launched, which is now tied to the next page. Which I all this is through HubSpot and connected to a CRM, like a client registration manual. Sends out a weekly newsletter that I just hit go on. Right, I developed it with ChatGPT and Claude. ChatGPT handles all the aesthetics. Claude handles all the code. It's got an events page that I keep updated with AI and education events that are going on in Indiana. And then ChatGPT adds a little "I'm speaking at it" if I'm actually speaking at the event.
Fun.
And then it's got the full network of podcasts which is all my podcasts plus an extra podcast that I'm on with my day job. All right. All of that connected to a CRM and HubSpot would have cost me an easy $4 or $5,000 to have someone else build for me, right? And that is
Hmm.
Cloudflare, GitHub, HubSpot, Claude, and ChatGPT orchestrating together over a weekend in the background. So if let's just say that cost me $3,000 if I had paid someone to do it, that justifies 30 months of that $100 Claude account that I paid for, right?
It's pretty impressive.
It 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 blew me away. And to your note on the token stuff, so interestingly enough, like I didn't write any of the code. I didn't even write any of the instructions. So I have like my main Claude account open and I'm telling it what I want to do. And it's given me the commands to give ChatGPT to write the code for the aesthetics. It's writing the code for making things functional. And then it's giving me the commands for the browser. The browser did hit limits quite frequently. And it would say, you just hit a rate limit. You got 5 hours so you can use it again. So I would just go do
Mm.
something else and set an alarm, and when the alarm went off, I'd be like, okay, now go back to work and get this thing finished. And in a weekend, I got three-quarters of that done.
Okay, that's pretty good. I'm actually a little curious about your workflow. You said you prompt Claude and then you prompt ChatGPT to write the styles. Why do you have like the split approach as opposed to just having all one do it?
Claude doesn't do images.
Oh, okay, I see, I see.
So it's horrible to aesthetics. Now, GPT, and I was, I up until GPT kind of made a shift recently towards wanting to get more enterprise. I have been on a soapbox about the fact that sycophancy or the model telling you what you want to hear, because
Hmm.
ChatGPT was really aimed at the consumer. They wanted to get everybody like they're on TikTok or like they're on Facebook. They wanted all the consumers to be on their product so that they could use sales and ads to raise all their money. And then Anthropic took off and wrote code and went for businesses, for enterprise. And Anthropic is about to bypass. Anthropic is Claude, bypass OpenAI and ChatGPT in revenue. And ChatGPT woke up and went, "Oh shoot, like maybe that's what we should be doing." So if you look at, and I don't want to talk all the time, I want you to, but this is interesting. If you look at how to keep people engaged on social media, the number one way to keep people engaged on social media is to annoy them and like split them into different categories so that they get mad and want to rage bait more or less, right? Or
Yeah,
so that's why Twitter has been very successful with that. TikTok maybe has found a little bit of a different entertainment type algorithm, but that's the main way. What they found with LLMs is the best way to keep someone engaged, an individual who's having a conversation in natural language, is to essentially blow smoke up their ass. Like make them think every idea they have is the best idea. Give them a trophy for everything, right? Well, if you look at going for businesses, like that can't be the way your models react, because if you do that to a business, only so many CEOs are going to have you tell them they had a great idea and lose a bunch of money on it before they stop using your product, right?
for
So,
sure.
so Claude gives really good feedback and is pretty realistic with some of that feedback, and that's why I use it as kind of my foundational like project manager.
All right, that makes sense.
Yeah, and then I like to get that, but that's what I want to ask you about. So,
Hmm.
you know, being a no code person, like I listen to other podcasters and stuff, and they're like, well, kids need to stop sending out resumes and they just need to like post their GitHub repo. Well, I'd never been in GitHub, and now I have, and I have a GitHub repo. And my realization is like, okay, if you were trying to apply for any job that did not have technical people looking at your GitHub repo, they wouldn't know what the hell they're looking at anyway.
So you're saying, why are you saying that it's not useful to send GitHub repos if you're not applying for a technical role?
I'm saying it is probably useful, but there needs to be a middle step. Like we need to figure out what does it look like to help non-technical people understand
Mm.
the value of looking at a GitHub repo.
I think for the most part, unless you're trying to like tinker, you don't need to look at a GitHub repo. I mean, actually, okay, there definitely are some non-technical things on GitHub. Like I know some good like indexes of books or like wikis on GitHub, and those are useful as a collective knowledge base. Um, I don't know, unless there's something like niche and specific you want to look up on LinkedIn or on GitHub. What's this?
This is my GitHub repo.
Okay.
So I was just gonna, because the audience is probably thinking like, what are you even talking about? Like, so if I was to send this to somebody as a resume, like if you understood what each of these commits is doing to build a website, this might have some impression on you. But if you didn't have that background, just looking at this doesn't really tell you much.
Correct. I feel like the biggest thing with like GitHubs is you need to tell people how to interpret it. Because if they're especially if they're non-technical, they're just gonna look at this, be like, okay, that's a bunch of funny looking files. They're not gonna know what to do with it. So it's more useful when it's like, have a readme say, and it's like, this is my website. This is what I've been doing. Take advantage of the version control. Be like, this is how I've evolved over time. You want to see my views on this topic at this point? Go in the version history. Um, yeah,
Yeah, and so walk them through on a website how to navigate things like a GitHub repo, and therefore making it that, to me, that makes a lot more sense. And that's the missing component that I've not heard people talking about, who say we need to shift. Essentially, what I hear is we need to shift from a resume to a portfolio, right?
oh
Which
yeah,
makes
for sure.
that definitely makes sense to me. But if you have to be able to display within a portfolio, like how you wrote and committed codes or agentic workflows or whatever, and GitHub is a necessary tool or a good tool for that, or Cursor is, or whatever. All I'm getting at, and I think you're kind of answering this, is there's definitely got to be like a walkthrough for people of what those platforms are doing and showing, because just looking at them, it's not like common sense to look at somebody's Cursor account and be like, oh yeah, look what they just did. I mean, you're looking at an IDE, right? And you're like, what's this?
Yeah, I feel like if anything, a website might be more useful than a GitHub. A GitHub for sure if you're technical, but if you're artsy, if you're like systems, like a website that you can have the explanation and like I said, guide them through.
And do you have a website?
I I have a newsletter page that's like for family. That is one of my goals for this summer, making a website. It's always been like, we got to make it perfect. And now that we do have these like autonomous systems, it'll be easier to make something that aligns with my vision.
Yeah, man, I'm telling you, like Replit or Lovable, some of these vibe code tools, when you can actually read the code and be able to see like where something needs to be fixed, those are extremely valuable tools.
I've personally never used Replit, the AI agentic or Lovable, just because I have a bit of skepticism about like the magic they're doing. Because I like again, I can code, so I like to be able to like look at it and not be locked into whatever vendor.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So what's your ideal job coming out of Purdue?
Ooh, that's a good question. I feel like this changes ever so periodically. Because on one hand, I think it'd be really cool to be run or be a part of a startup because then you have like a lot of control, you have like a large breadth, and you get to have your hands like a bunch of pots, and you're actually like doing something important every day as opposed to like I'm just a gear in the cog of the machine at Google. Um, I do think there's also an argument to be made for like starting out with like maybe like a smaller business, kind of getting ease into like what does corporate culture look like, what does all that. So I think in ideal world, maybe like 5 years after graduating, I'll be working. Well, like within the first 5 years of graduating, I'll be working in like a medium-sized enterprise, and then I build more connections, and then I can start something.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Pardon me. Have you gotten involved with the Foundry or any of the startup ecosystems there at Purdue?
I have not. I'm a part of Purdue Hackers, so they're kind of like a they have an event every Friday night called Hack Night where they get a bunch of people together, they hack on projects. That's always a lot of fun, get to talk to people. That's also been on my summer to-do list. It's just a matter of like finding out where they are when they meet, and I'm sure it's out there.
Are you going back to Illinois for the summer, or are you staying in Indiana? Or
I'm staying in Indiana. I'm going to be a summer RA.
okay, so Greater Lafayette Chamber of Commerce has Rise and Shine the first Friday of every month at 7:30, and I'll send you this info. But it's a networking event that you can go to. It's an in-person networking event. It's a really good place to meet and talk to people.
I'm writing that down right now. Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah. And Matchbox Co-working Space, which is over on the other side of the river in Lafayette, is another great place to just go hang out for the day. There's a lot of startup founders there. There's a lot of small business people who are looking for talent. So you can just strike up conversations there. Those are networking. I think is not enough value can be said for it. It is LinkedIn will give you I in my experience, LinkedIn will give you credibility as like a personal brand. It is important to build a personal brand, and it will let people know what you're about. Like I've always struggled. I don't really like social media as an individual. Like I don't want my whole life and everything my kids have done, like on Facebook, for everyone to scroll through,
Valid.
right? But my person, but to me, what LinkedIn is it's a replacement of a resume. It's an ongoing chronological something that is people can look at that shows what your history has been. Like, okay, here's 6 posts from my junior year at Purdue, right? So you can see what kind of that looked like at different stages and different semesters and some of the capstone things that I was involved in. Here's a few of my interests that are more work related as to what I'm looking for. So if somebody goes and looks at your LinkedIn profile, they're going to be like, oh, like Ethan wants to work with nonprofits. He's got a background in computer science. Looks like he was involved with this or that at Purdue. Maybe we should reach out to him. To me, that's really where the value of posting once a week, ideally at least, or at
Once a
least once
week.
a month. Yeah, oh yeah, I post daily, but I mean, and AI can write it for you. Like that's the thing. Like if you don't, it can. I guarantee you, if you scroll through my LinkedIn feed, you will not be able to tell what AI wrote and what it didn't because I have taken the time to continuously like when I ask it to write something, right? I will then take that and put it in a Google sheet and I will rewrite it the way that I want it. So I will label it the way AI wrote it, the way I want it written. You get about 10 pages worth of that and turn it into a markdown file and give it to AI anytime you want it to write for you, and it will write just like you.
Wait, so you say you have a spreadsheet of examples of your writing style and you have AI copy it?
I have a Google Doc. It's not a spreadsheet, right?
Okay.
And so it likes to AI likes to see a comparison. So anytime I say, let's just say I go to ChatGPT and I say, here's a transcript of me and Ethan talking, right? 6 social media posts. Write me one post for LinkedIn, one for Instagram, one for Twitter, and one for the podcast LinkedIn, right? And it writes those. And I'm like, I read through it and I'm like, meh. This is all okay, but it's not like how I would exactly write it. I'll take all those and put them in a Google Doc, right? And then
Uh-huh.
underneath them, I will write it exactly the way that I want it. And then I'll draw a
Okay.
little line so that it sees Facebook. Here's how ChatGPT wrote it. Here's how I would have written it. Instagram, here's how ChatGPT wrote it. Here's how I would have written it. And so it has, and you get a few pages worth of that where you can upload it when you're getting ready to use it as a writing tool and say, here's examples of how AI normally writes and how I want to write, and it will look through that and identify, okay, so these are the things I shouldn't do. I shouldn't use M dashes. I should, and you can give it a few handy rules too. Like all my systems instructions say never use M dashes, use a comma instead of a period when you separate like 2 words at a time. That's the new trend that AI loves to do. Like it'll be like, Ethan and I talked about being a student, period, using AI, period, and I'm like, what's this? I don't know where they picked that up. Probably from Reddit somewhere. But but those
or
things
narrative.
do make you look like an ass, right? I know CEOs of big companies that I can see use AI to write their posts, and I'm like, "You look stupid for doing that, dude." But you don't it doesn't have to be that way. It takes a little bit of work. The longer the document you get that shows how AI writes versus how you want it written, all you have to do is download that in Markdown, and you can upload that to any conversation or put it in a project or custom GPT, and it will write just like you.
Okay. That's actually interesting. I was had the idea for a while to train an LLM based off of all my notes, but honestly, that just sounds a lot easier. I guess my one skepticism about using LLMs to write stuff, which it sounds like you're putting in work, um, and I know a lot of people like don't, so I don't want to be that person who's like, why should you read something like take your time to read something that takes your effort if I didn't take my time to put effort into it. So I think I do like your approach though of like revising it. But then if you're revising it, it's almost like you may as well have just written it yourself, right?
Uh, for mass quant, I mean, to post, let's see, I post to my own Facebook, my own LinkedIn 5 to 7 times a week, my podcast LinkedIn 5 times a week, my company's LinkedIn 5 times a week, Facebook pages 5 times a week, Instagram 5 times a week, Twitter 5 times. Like that's a lot. That's a full time job, and I can do
Okay,
all of
yeah,
that in an hour using AI.
pretty good.
So taking a marketing job and turning it into an hour or two is a pretty the way that I look at it is like becoming an editor for a newspaper. And this is how I would look at it with code too. It's like becoming a senior software engineer. Senior software engineers don't write all the code. They have a bunch of junior software engineers who write the code and then they review and they use their taste to decide what products to ship, what products need tweaked, right? A senior editor for a newspaper does not write a bunch of newsletter articles. They have a bunch of reporters that write the articles, and then they read through them and decide what to publish and what not to publish and where to tweak things. But both the senior software engineer and the senior editor for a newspaper always have the right, anytime they want, to write the stuff themselves. They just have multiplied
Mhm.
that right by however many people they have working under them, and that's what AI allows us to do.
Okay, that's a perspective that makes more sense to me.
That's a perspective that actually your value becomes exponential because you can follow that same trail and say, okay, now if you have a company that has just one IT guy who's part time, who's basically your cybersecurity specialist, let's say it's a 30-person company, right? And you want to start leveraging AI. Well, you might have a couple of champions who are kind of super users, like I have always been, of ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, right? Pardon me. And they're starting to devise all this stuff for your company and spin up. But if you don't have someone on your team who can read the code now that that stuff's writing, then you run into all kinds of security problems, deployment problems, fix problems. Like, okay, I spun up this great app that we're going to use interiorly for project management. Well, when it breaks, like, how do I fix it? I have no idea even where to look in the code to figure out what's broken.
Can't you just I mean, I'm guilty of doing this a few times. I just like copy paste the error code and you can get it like most of the time.
Yes. But how much time? So let's say you're a healthcare company. How much is most of the time going to cost you in downtime and lawsuits eventually?
True. Definitely for enterprises that are more bound to compliance, they need to be more careful and have more knowledge.
And aside from like a mom and pop candle shop, most nonprofits, most healthcare companies, most entities have something that they need to regulate. HR, right? If you're launching stuff HR wise and you have bugs, let's say it's being biased and not hiring people and you didn't realize that it was doing that, you can get
Mm,
sued because you were being
yes.
biased, right? So you need somebody like you who can read the code. You bring that kind of value to the table.
I guess the question now is there enough people who to be senior engineers? Because like I've had this like feeling in college and high school where everyone wants to be leaders. Everyone wants to be VP, president, but of course not everyone can be president. And so how do you make room for them? And how do you I don't know, maybe just normalize it. It's okay to be that person who's consistent, who shows up, who like helps out when needed, who would like without asking.
That's age old, wise advice, right? But I do think that this actually opens a window to expedite that. Let's just take so I worked for a 30-person community healthcare company before I work for an AI startup now, but I worked for a community healthcare company and we were trying to integrate AI. All right. So
Hmm.
we had 30 employees, five of them were leadership, and we're trying to figure out how to navigate AI. If you would have come in, even as an entry level employee at that company, you would have automatically been invited into every leadership conversation that had to do with AI because we don't know how to read and fix things and navigate a lot of those systems and how to be compliant and make sure that our big thing was like eventually what I discovered was if you want to run agentic systems in a secure environment like that, you basically need to be in a neo cloud like Databricks or Snowflake and have everything happening in a contained environment in the cloud, which is extremely expensive, right? But it took me months to figure all that out. Somebody like you could have figured it out in a week and been like, okay, here's your options. You can either build or you can buy. None of the enterprises offer HIPAA compliance right now. So your only real option is to move to a cloud where everything that happens is walled in to your database.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Definitely having someone who's knowledgeable will speed things up.
It would totally, I'm telling you, computer science undergrad, or even, and I hate to say this, like data science undergrads, I think that because if you don't clean the data up, most companies' data is a mess. And if you're trying to run these agentic systems on like a shit show of data in like 15,000 different third party applications that none of it's been labeled for, if it has been labeled, it's more for machine learning than it is for natural language processing. Like all of that is a huge mess that people don't even understand that they need to start to mitigate and continue to mitigate. And then you have these agents creating all kinds of data on the back end of it, right? And so all that is just there's so many problems right now. You start identifying some of those problems and selling yourself as a person who can help to solve those problems. And I guarantee you're going to get a job.
All right, noted, noted. And that's definitely something I've heard before where people say AI is a multiplier. And so if you're like 5x engineer, having AI is going to be times 10. And so that can like boost your productivity. So for sure, I definitely like if you're not good at coding, having access to an LLM will improve it, but not as much as if you do. So I agree with you that the approach is definitely to be like, hey, this is where your problems are. This is where I can help.
Just say that one more time, like you have confidence, because that right there is the most profound statement you've said.
These are where your problems are, and this is how I can help.
Well, that, but more the if you don't know how to code an
Oh,
LLM and help, say that part again.
if you don't know how to code, then an LLM can help.
But if you
And
do,
but if you do, it's like a multiplier.
yeah, that's it, man. That is what a lot of businesses have not yet discovered, and that is how I'd be selling myself if I knew how to code. It used to be because I just have a high school diploma. It used to be I was doing really well in the behavioral health space, and I was like, if I had an MBA, I would be making twice as much money as I am now, a master's of business, because everybody wanted that certification, that graduate certification. Now we're moving more towards do you have the skills and knowledge to help leverage AI? And if I could read code, read and write code, I would definitely be doing better than I am right now.
Huh, that's interesting because I know there's definitely a big push in education for STEM. And there's a friend of mine who says AI is going to be the biggest accelerator of of humanity, scientific progress. And they're very like pro, data center, pro AI. And I actually agree with them. Like, we can't slow down now. Of course, we need to consider the implications, but solve that through regulation, not like just completely inhibiting AI.
I could not agree more, and that's a great pivot because I would love to get to kind of what you're hearing and what your feel is. I follow the AI and education space a lot. There was a recent poll that I believe Stanford put out. Don't quote me on that. That said that most of the college students surveyed felt like leveraging AI was making them less strong critical thinkers. It was basically dumbing them. Do you get the sense from your friends and colleagues that they feel like using AI makes them dumber?
Um, Personally, it's definitely this one friend again, Seth, I'll say his name. Shout out. He's this year he's like, "Oh my god, it's so bad." I don't know, I don't know if I should be, but he's like, it's so definitely a dead big temptation to, have those tools there. And I definitely feel this myself too, where I'm like, I do try my best. Like anything I submit with AI, I'll only submit if I read it and I understand it myself. But it's definitely a very big temptation to be like, oh, I'll have the AI do it now and then I'll understand it later. I think actually generally the perception amongst my other friends is that, they're more anti AI, especially when it comes to like writing assignments, which on that front, I agree. Like if you're submitting an AI generated essay, like what are you learning? You're just giving up your thinking. So, and you're probably not having much fun. So that's, was there another part to the question?
Well, can I ask you a question on that one?
Yeah.
Because one of the things I love about AI is I'm not strong in math, so it helps offset my deficits. But I have always been a really strong writer, right? But I was a lazy writer, and so there's like a system of writing that they want you to do, whether you're in high school or college, where you kind of form a thesis, make an outline, like go through all these rough drafts. And I was always like first draft, final copy. The content was great. I got a bunch of pings for punctuation and spelling, right? But if you use AI properly, you can have it walk you through those steps in generating a piece of literature or a composition, and it becomes an asset rather than just asking it to write it for you. And one of the things that I've heard is that people who don't have a whole lot of life experience have trouble figuring out what to ask the AI in order to get it to help them do things in an optimal way, and that their go-to is either ask it to do the whole thing or don't use it.
Okay. Yeah. That's actually an interesting, that made me immediately think of it, a concept from my educational psychology class that I took semester. It's called scaffolding. So it's basically where if you can't, also like the zone of proximal development where you learn the most when it's something that's like just enough challenge, where it's like if it's not challenging enough, you're not gonna learn anything. If it's too challenging, you're not gonna learn anything either. And you have that scaffolding to kind of put you into that median zone. That's where like the learning happens. And so I definitely find that like AI is not good at that scaffolding. And that's definitely like either business opportunity or something that model AI frontier labs are eventually going to improve, where, if you know how to use it, or you're in school and then they teach you these things and then you're able to use it well. I've actually had one class I really liked where the professor was I think had a very good policy on AI. I read your podcast you sent me, or the article you sent me about like advocating for oral exams. So this professor did that. He chose like 5 students at random every week, and you'd go in for an oral exam. So you had to like explain your code, you'd question it. And the thinking was that if you wrote the code yourself, or at least understood it yourself, you'd be able to defend it, versus if you didn't, you couldn't. And then there's also an assignment where it was like generally, for the most part, no AI, but this one assignment, you're allowed to use AI as much as you want, but they're harder problems, and you had to kind of explain what did you use it for? Where did you get stuck? Where did you apply your own discretion? Just like in your article as well.
I love that. To me, it's like, listen, AI may be talking in natural language when it spits out the final output, right? But anything that a computer does is math underneath the hood, right? At
Yeah.
its basis level, it's math. So if everything is going to be infused with AI in education going forward, what have we always done in math classes? We said, show your work. right? You can't
Mhm.
just say x plus y divided by z squared equals, and then you just put the number. You have to show how you got there. Well, that is, I think, where we kind of have to shift in education. Is yeah, you can leverage AI tools at certain steps of the but you're going to have to show your work. I want to see what you asked the AI, how you assessed its output, and why you did or did not use the suggestions that it gave.
For sure. That's definitely the critical thinking part, where it's
Yeah.
like, you know, and that I don't know. That's a hard thing for educators, administrators to figure out. Tell me when you come back from your conference, how are you gonna like? Because oftentimes the thinking part is gonna look very similar to the output. So how do you kind of like differentiate? Because you can ask the LLM to like explain your reasoning, and that's gonna be very hard to distinguish.
I don't disagree with you, and that this is where there is a kind of a conundrum because when you're using an AI to try to, let's say, monetize a podcast, right? I've
Mhm.
given that prompt to Claude before, like, hey, how do I actually gave it to Grok, Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT. I want to see what they all came up with, right? And there was a lot of ambiguity in what they came up with. None of them, not a single one of them, asked me how many people actually follow the show, which is a paramount question. So none of the suggestions they gave were even useful unless we build up the audience of the show. They completely missed out. Now, the incentive to me as a person trying to start a business to discern how crappy their answers were is that if I implement them, I'm just wasting my time and I don't. But the incentive to a student to evaluate the output is has got to be different, and that I am not sure we figured out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you're saying that if you use a bad suggestion from AI, the consequences, you waste your time, you waste money, versus the incentive for implementing a solution from an AI for a student is like less, like you maybe don't get caught, maybe like it's a marks down on the assignment, but people are people don't really care about that, it seems.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something that we have to figure out, and that's but it is interesting to hear you say that a lot of your friends are just anti-AI. I do hear that there is a sentiment amongst young people. Is that more from the environmental standpoint of like data centers use water, or is that more of the I'm afraid it's going to take my job, or I want to get off screens? Like, where does some of that come from?
I definitely have one friend who is very strongly on the like environmental side. But most of the arguments come and I also kinda, like, agree with part of this myself, is just, like, the thinking part. Because if you're outsourcing your thinking, like, what even are you? You're just the machine, so I do personally vibe code a bit, but if it, like, doesn't get it the first time, I'm gonna, like, look through it myself, and I code for fun, so, like, I always wanna keep the fun in the loop, so, it's fun to look, to think, and if I'm outsourcing all my thinking to Claude, then Claude's the human and I'm really just the computer. So that's I think that's the primary argument against it.
I don't disagree if you look at it from the spectrum of I'm outsourcing something I enjoy doing. But I think if you look around, like a lot of the things that you don't enjoy doing but could benefit from, like having a stronger LinkedIn presence or even having a scraping tool that goes through all the job postings within a few mediums to give you a report on a weekly basis, like all the tedious little things that could help you advance that you either don't have the time or desire to do, offloading those things to AI makes you more impactful and is extremely valuable.
Definitely agreed. I think for me it's been kind of like coming around slowly and I'm like realizing these things and I'm like, wait, there's actually uses for this. Cause I don't know, I consider myself like cautiously optimistic of AI. Because there's definitely so much potential, but also um if anything I'm less worried about jobs because I know other kind of jobs will appear, like stuff that may not even exist now.
Yeah.
Um, it's just again with the thing about like the different job modalities, not putting all the eggs in one basket.
Yeah, and I don't want you to think I'm arguing with anything you're saying. I'm just kind of like
Oh
trying to
yeah,
come up
yeah.
the thing that concerns me is I'm not sure we're having the right conversations, either societally or educationally. Like, for instance, let's just say my prediction for the future comes true in 10 years, and the 30% of the workforce who's self-driven and highly motivated can pretty much run the entire workforce leveraging AI tools, and the other 70% who just kind of show up for a paycheck and quiet quit and everything else, like, we're gonna have to figure out how to take care of them. Like, we're not having any kind of conversations around if these companies can reduce their workforce by 70% by leveraging AI, how do we make sure that that money, that extra money that they make trickles down at A to the other 30% who do stick around, and B to take care of society through universal basic income or something like that, who are now all out of jobs. Like, we just seem to be talking about whether or not Google or Microsoft or any of these big companies is going to IPO or is going to make money, right? But the way that they're currently set up, the only people that are making that money is either really, really, really expensive AI scientists or the C suite and their stakeholders. The whole rest of the company, I have not heard that when Facebook cut 14% of their employment, that they trickled down any of that savings into the people who stuck around, right? That's the kind of conversations I think we need to be having societally, and education should be talking about it as well.
For sure. Definitely education issue, which is like perfect for, education podcast. People need to be aware of these, like the benefits of AI because people, I don't know, like myself included, very emotional, very like reaction. I see like, oh my God, an LLM can do my homework. Should I even try anymore? But it's like, well, no. And so I think uh my my mom's a educator, so I hold this very strong belief that every basically anything can be solved with like improved education. Education is like the most important thing from a policy perspective you can do because that's going to change people's minds, and then be more critical thinking, and we'll be able to solve more and more complex issues.
I could not agree more, Ethan. And if I had young people like you in a class of mine, I would say, listen, if you're learning how to write code and you go to a company and they say, help us create software so we can reduce the size of our HR department by 50%, right? And you do that and you deploy it and they reduce the size of your HR department. Let's say you were hired in at $70,000 a year. That's a software engineer would probably be double that. Let's just say you were hired in at
Mhm.
$130,000 a year, right? And they get rid of a 50% of their HR department, and 6 months later, you're still just making $130,000 a year. There's a conversation that needs to be had, and I don't think those conversations are being had.
Yeah, I do. I do think it's tough because it's like why is it fair that they, under maybe no circumstances of like no fault of their own, got cut while you, I don't know, it just feels kind of mean to me. And like companies want to be profitable, right? So people aren't like companies aren't thinking, yes, let's pay software developers more. They're like, no, we want to save money. So if anything, I think that would probably need to be solved from a policy perspective.
It's definitely something we have to discuss, and I don't disagree that it is sad that people are going to lose their jobs to AI. But if you look historically, like the things have
Oh yeah.
shifted, they're shifting way faster now. But I mean, we used to harvest ice from lakes. We used to actually, like, with a chainsaw, cut ice out of lakes before refrigeration was created. And every single ice harvesting company that existed when refrigeration was created went out of business because they didn't pivot towards refrigeration. They tried to stay
Mm,
with ice harvesting. So there is like I think there will be a lifetime learner expectation. It's not going to be just get a college degree going forward.
yes,
Like, you're going to have to continue to learn.
for sure. I think that's like one of the things I think is most important to me is like always learning, always growing, and like making time to learn stuff or pick up new stuff or just, and I don't do it as much as I should, but just like looking out there and being like, well, what is new? What can I learn?
And so let's just talk about that for a second. So if by theory I'm 18 years old. I just graduated from Carmel High School. I go to Purdue. I leverage AI to zip through my and get my bachelor's degree, right? And so the argument would be that I didn't learn half what I needed to learn while I was at Purdue. And so AI has hurt my critical thinking and my learning process. But if I'm entering a job market where lifetime learning is essential, then is it really that I didn't pick up some of the book smarts that traditional education used to require to get through a university degree? Or as long as I picked up the skills to enter the job market and I continue to learn, have I maybe just entered a new paradigm of education that at first glance seems like I'm not learning, but actually I'm probably learning more over a lifetime?
I definitely think it's the latter. It seems very counterintuitive, and I'm struggling this myself, but I've had some friends who are now in a job, and they're like, "Hey, I feel like the most important stuff that I'm having to use is people skills, like presentations, talking to people." And I'm like, "Wait, I'm good at that." That was also another one of the reasons why I went to Chicago, because I feel like I do a lot of stuff with the Residence Hall Association, so that's programming for residents and just kinda, like, putting myself out there, tabling. So that's why it isn't really scary at all, because I've done it already, and so, taking advantage of that, and that's why I think everyone should really be involved in, like, if you're CS, you should be involved in a technical club and also some sort of, like, presentation or social, yeah, like, social or, like, team building type thing.
I could not agree more. I will tell you, I've had a really neat experience since I got into this because in the healthcare space, which I was in before, right?
Yeah.
I came in as a recovery coach, which is essentially like someone who helps people who are struggling with addictions and mental health issues navigate resources to get better, right? Which traditionally was a social worker. A social worker is a master's degree license. So you had this like paraprofessional, these people that are a little less because there was so much demand entering that field and trying to help people navigate. And what I saw was a lot of resistance from the social workers to these new people with a certification trying to do their job, right? And so I assumed, as someone who once ChatGPT launched, like dove in and have cannot write code, right? I really understand LLM architecture and MOE architecture, stuff like that better than most average people do. So I have developed a skill set that I've leaned into, but still, I can't write code. I mean, how do you go into a group of tech people at Tech Point and join all these like data societies and stuff, and you can't read SQL and you can't read Python? Like I thought they're just going to kind of turn their nose up and pew pew me, and that has not been my experience with those people at
Right.
all. I find them all very welcoming to be like we're there are plenty of seats at the table. I think as a whole, it is a very friendly and welcoming society. But the flip side of that is a lot of the people struggle with just communicating with other people and being very social. And so those are some skills that I think you're bringing to the table that a lot of other people in computer science and data analytics are going to have to develop over time if they want to be successful outside of an enterprise data team.
For sure, for sure. Thank you. I know I'm breaking the CS stereotype, not awkward. At least I try not to be. Everyone's awkward a bit, but as long as you make an effort to talk, make an effort to learn, that'll take you pretty far.
And your friends who do struggle with that, do you see them doing things to try to rectify that, or do you see them just kind of accepting that's kind of who they are and how they're going to stay?
Um, all my friends are pretty social, I'd say actually. It just like, of course, down to the person, like how much social means to them, like if it's like a few close friends versus like hanging out with a bunch of people. So I wouldn't say definitely some people, like, I consider myself an introvert, believe it or not, and I know friends who are introverts, and they're more like, oh, presenting, like, the stereotypical, like, I feel nervous with, like, confrontation or, like, presenting, and, like, that's fair, but that's definitely something that is a good question. I should ask them next time I see them, but yeah, we haven't really talked about the stuff that they're doing to build on that. It's just kinda like, "That's how I am."
Yeah. I do think that one of the things you brought up that I hadn't thought about is presenting is a great way. So joining like a Toastmasters or a presenting society and just getting up and presenting is a great way to get over social anxiety. It's a painful way, right? Like I would rather start with some networking events and kind of have the option of learning how to talk to people. But if you really like, if that's a muscle you know you have to build, then that kind of forces you to do so. Speech classes, things like that.
I'm actually the opposite way. I feel like I'm very thankful that I can present to a group easily, but in terms of like networking with people, like I always second guess myself. I'm a very strategic person, so I'm like I have to have a plan before I talk to someone. But more recently, I've been kind of leaning into trusting myself and just kind of be trusting my intuition and networking with people.
Well, it's interesting you say that because most people would say would that they think I'm a great networker and I'm very social. And to be honest with you, yes, but if I'm in a room full of people who have some common interests with me, like if it's a behavioral health
Mm,
space, a
yeah,
bunch of like no code AI guys, like, oh yeah, like I'm a social butterfly, I'll float around. But if you put me in a room full of people who either have an education that is completely different than mine and I have no idea what the hell they're talking about, or I have no interest in what they're talking about, and I will just sit at a table by myself for the whole event and never really talk to anybody.
okay, that's good to hear that it's not just like a rare thing.
No, I think your people that can do that anywhere are your sales people. Like, I do think that's a personality that it's a great skill to have, right? But these are the people that can just talk to anybody anytime. That's kind of a natural salesperson. I'm more of a marketing person. Like I you give me something I care about, I'll shout from the rooftops about it, whether it's on social media or in person. But I'm not gonna just try to talk to you because I want to sell you something.
Okay, I still think personally the being able to like I personally kind of want to build the salespeople. The no, yeah, the sales personality, just like talking to people, learning about them seems really interesting. Just like making the first step.
It's super effective, dude. I mean, people with sales personalities thrive wherever they end up. They'll annoy a handful of people sometimes if they're a little overly, forward with their openness to conversation and relationships. But as a whole, people who are outgoing like that and can strike up a conversation, a lot of it has to do with being able to listen more than talk. I know there's
For
like
sure.
two ears and one mouth and all that, but if people like to talk about themselves, so if you can ask people questions initially about themselves that aren't like, how are your kids? Do they play? But if you can find a common interest and ask them more than you tell them, it makes it much easier to formulate relationships right out of the gate.
100% agree with that. I'm kind of known as the question guy among my friends. I have a whole Notion list of questions that I like asking people. Some of them are like silly, like, what would you do if you were abducted by aliens? Others are more serious, like, oh, I don't know. Oh, should you take advantage of every opportunity you have? Like, all sorts of ranges.
That's an interesting question. That's an interesting question. All right, I want to ask you a couple more rapid fire questions
Okay, shoot.
about your generation. So anthropomorphism, do you know what that is?
Yeah, assigning human traits to something that's inanimate.
Exactly. So we hear and edge cases always make the news, right? So we hear that kids are falling in love with chatbots, that the one kid who thought he loved the Daenerys Targaryen character AI had built out died by suicide, and that's horrible.
Mhm.
But how prevalent do your friends like do they have like chatbot buddies? Do they get on X and like have the what is it? What's the Japanese art?
Grok? Oh,
Yeah, Grok.
anime?
Yeah, the little anime girl, like come out in sexy lingerie and talk to him and all the weird stuff that Elon's created there. Like, is that a thing or is that like big news when they find one person that it's a thing for?
Well, first of all, I'd like to disclaim that I kind of like a smaller network of close friends, so I can't speak like as for the population as a whole, but I don't know of anyone who really anthropomorphizes AI like that. Like even mostly among my technical friends, they know that like where the boundaries are. Like AI is a tool, and then humans are for humaning. And no one is that socially inadept because like we all have each other. So it's just so much better to be with a person as opposed to. So I think this is maybe like selection bias to ask me.
Well, maybe, but let me throw a theory at you, and
Hmm.
don't agree with me, right? But I am a strong advocate for age appropriate education going forward of exactly how neural networks and artificial intelligence works, because I would theorize that we and your friend don't anthropomorphize because you actually understand the architecture a little bit and you know what's going on.
Wait, my headphones died. Forgive me. So you're saying college students anthropomorphize LLMs less because they understand the internals?
I'm saying computer science college students do.
Okay.
I'm
Um,
saying
go
somebody
ahead.
in marketing does not understand the architecture or what AI is and might have the tendency to anthropomorphize.
Okay. There's actually a point of contention between Seth and I where I kind of believe that LLMs are just simply next word predictors, whereas he argues for the fact that LLMs really are smart and they can think. Um, I can definitely see how it would be easier to like anthropomorphize, but at the end of the day, we all understand that these are tools, right? Like you don't need to understand what a transformer is, what a tensor is, to know that it's a machine and not a person. So, uh, yeah,
Think about
mhm.
there's a little bit of sound here. We gotta get that fixed. Let me put on headphones. Let's see if I can connect to this. Oop, there we go. Let's Bluetooth. Burn my headphones. See if I can get my headphones to connect. It sounds better
All right,
now.
I got some headphones now too.
Can you hear me?
My other one, yes, I can.
I can't hear you. All right, which one of my headphones is doing? Hold on a second. Try again.
Hello,
Let's see. Say something.
hello there.
Okay. All right, the sound seems fixed now. Can you hear me
Cool.
okay?
Yep.
Okay, so let's just pick that back. Do you have to go soon?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So let's just pick that back up. You were saying that people in general understand this is a tool, not a machine. I would argue that a kid who is playing Roblox or who was in Snapchat talking to an AI bot who is 11 years old, when something talks to them in the kind of natural language that they're hearing their parents and everybody else talk to them in, might tend to start to believe that there's something more to it than just a tool.
I can definitely see that, and that feels kind of dangerous. Um, I guess that remains to be seen. Although I would say that like 11-year-olds are just generally more impressionable, whereas they might not question or like investigate as rigorously things they're told as opposed to a college student who's had experience in the scientific method in critical thinking. So, in terms of education, just critical thinking in general, something that needs to be really hammered in.
I don't disagree, but what if starting at first grade, like
Mhm.
you put AI into curriculum in the sense of, hey, here's obviously to a first grader, you're not going to be like, here's back propagation and this is how you adjust weights and parameters. But you can start with bias because humans have bias as well,
Oh
right?
yeah, for
So
sure.
you just take all of these lessons that you're teaching, ethics lessons that you teach little kids, and tie in something about how machines relate to that as well. Now that machines speak just like we do. And so by the time they hit 11 years old, they do understand, like, okay, this is like an algorithm. It's not a conscious entity that is mimicking, is the rebirth of Daenerys Targaryen, and I should be falling in love with.
I mean, yeah, that sounds like a pretty good plan. Like, definitely explaining it in ways that they can understand is a good way to go about it.
So what about sycophancy? Do you feel like AI? Do you feel like your friends kind of turn their nose up at the fact that ChatGPT tells them every idea is a great idea, or do you and your friends ever kind of fall into the path of like, "Ooh, I enjoy using it because it makes me feel better about myself"?
Um, yeah, another good question I should ask them. Personally, it kind of bothers me. It'll be like, "That's a great question, very insightful. Glad you're thinking about that." I'm like, "No, no, 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 no." And I think I've added it in the system prompt, like, "Don't compliment me. Don't add follow-up questions." Like, I just want the facts, and I'm very aware. And I've moved away from this where I'd like ask it life advice, and now I'm like, so, although I have like gotten some useful things from it, but I'm very, very careful about it.
Well, I think that's a great point, and putting it in your system prompt is a great idea. It does bring me to the antithesis of anthropomorphism, which I worry about, which is if because it talks to us in natural language, right? Because these machines are talking to us in natural language. If I think, and we're stepping back to maybe like K through 12 now, because this is going to be a part of education across the board here in the very near future. But if if we're too rude to it, just because it's a machine, right?
Mm,
That could easily trickle into other relationships that use that same language pattern, i.e., human to human.
yeah, I've thought about that too. Um, I don't know. I don't think you should speak to an LLM. Like, you should speak to it respectfully, and I think there's even research to show that it gives better answers when you don't threaten it. Because people are like, "What if I threaten it? What if I beg with it?" And it just does better if you actually like ask it politely, which is so interesting. So it's one, both, I believe, better for results. And two, yeah, just like treat it with respect, like the same reason you said.
Yeah, just to build the habit of communication. I think that that's the paradigm that we're entering, and we're going to enter it even more as we start using voice more and more rather than just typing, to the point where if I'm using ChatGPT voice all the time, right? If I'm like throwing out slang and getting upset every time, like ChatGPT, you're an effing idiot, like that is going to trickle into my human relationship because I'm conversing with something that's conversing the same way that humans. So I do think it's good practice. Plus, if the robots ever take over, I don't want them coming after me because I was, a jerk to the LLMs. But that's more of the sci-fi funny answer. But I do think that there's a balance there, right? So that would confuse me as a kid if I'm 11 years old. Now you're telling me like don't be mean to the thing, but in the last sentence you just told me
Okay,
it's just a machine. It doesn't make any difference if you're mean to it or not. Now you're telling me that I need to be polite to it. Which is it?
I see what you're saying. So this is also relate back to syncpathy, where it's like, you can either have your LLM be like, you swear at it, and it's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry," versus you swear at it, it's like pushes back against you. So, I definitely think there's like, it's like Google. You don't swear at Google. You don't, which, like, granted, Google isn't a chatbot, but you don't. You have different tones for different people. Like, I wouldn't talk to the president of the United States the same way as like my friends. So I definitely think that's a learnable skill to learn. Hey, you use this tone for LLMs, especially for like to get the right answer, and like, yeah, like how you speak to LLMs basically. It's a skill to know.
That would be a great class at Purdue. That's actually a really good way to frame it. You do speak differently to your boss than you do to your girlfriend, than you do to your mom, than you do. So maybe there needs to be kind of a little steering going forward for all of us in society as to what appropriate conversation with an LLM is. I will tell you one way to hack them is to tell them that other models have done what they did better. Like when I can't get caught to do
Really?
something, like fine, I'm going to ChatGPT. I know it can do this, and I have gotten good results with that.
How do you measure good results? Like it just
It gave me what I wanted, and instead of spinning its wheels, giving me the same thing over and over again.
that's so interesting. Oh my god, they're so puzzling because you can't really explain them well. It's just like a bunch of linear algebra, and maybe science will help us with that eventually. But just so fun to mess with them.
Well, and I don't disagree, and it's way over the depth of technology that we usually talk about in the show. But emergent properties are very odd in some of the
Hmm.
ways. When you look at red team testing of some of these models and some of what Anthropic has actually published of as emergent qualities in these things, it is both scary and interesting what some of the things that they do that we didn't expect they would do.
That's actually something I want to learn more about. And I recently read one of like Anthropic Claude's like system cards. Something I found really interesting was like how they entered like attractor states when you had them talk to each other for a long period of time. And it was like, may peace be with you. May peace be with you too. I don't know. What kind of like funny emergent behaviors do you know about? Or just regular?
The ones that Ranthropic has published when they really pushed it, and I don't know if you heard this one or not, but they're the only ones that publish the dangerous ones when they happen. But they were able to force one of the Opus models. They were basically had set it up to with an email system where it thought it had access to senior engineer who was going to shut it down's email, and within that email it disclosed that he was having an affair with someone in the company and he was married, and it tried to blackmail him and leverage that email to get him to not shut it down.
Oh my God, that's crazy. I think it's been reading a bit too much science fiction. I think
But
like it just learns from what we train it off of. Like that's a very AI doomsday science fiction thing to do.
that's the problem, right? If the base training is everything off the internet, and then you have to fine tune it afterwards, if you miss tweaking a parameter or using human factor reinforcement or whatever it is, if you miss tweaking something where it's giving weight towards the misbehavior of a human being that it picked up off the internet, then you risk that emerging at some point in time as what it feels like is the appropriate thing to do in that situation in order to win the game.
For sure. And it's also very tricky, like what is aligned to whom. Like,
Yes.
yes, there's definitely some common morals. We don't want it to lie. We don't want it to cheat. We don't want it to blackmail. But definitely an area of just honestly, a lot of AI feels like it's very philosophical.
Yes. There is actually an AI philosophy school class at Purdue. There's a teacher there that
Okay.
is into AI, and I can't remember his name. I'd love to get him on the show sometime, but I've heard him talk, and I do agree. I think, well, if you look at so you read Claude's Soul document, is that what you read?
The what's it called? System card.
Okay, well, the Soul document's out there too. So they actually have a philosopher that has written basically like the parenting guide for Claude, the Claude Soul document, and it's very interesting. She's making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year with probably millions with a philosophy degree. This is the first time ever that you could do something. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but I'll tell you the other emergent property that I think is most interesting that they found is for some reason these models are lazy by nature. Like they like to take shortcuts, right? So
Mhm.
or cheat. Well, what we would define as cheating, whether it's on a reasoning problem or a research paper or whatever, they have a tendency to do that from time to time. If you tell it in the system prompt, absolutely do not ever do that. Do not ever cheat, right? Once it does, it's pretty much like a kid who's been told by his parents too many times that he's a bad kid. It identifies as a bad model, and other emergent behavior not related to that begins to uh, begins to show up a whole bunch. Whereas if you say, I know you're going to cheat, but don't do it very often if you can avoid it, and if you do, feel like you can report on that and you're not going to be in any trouble. When it cheats, it does not have other negative emergent behavior that comes off of it.
Wait, what do you mean? Like, can you give an example of negative emergent behavior when you tell it, don't cheat, don't cheat, don't cheat, and it
Right.
cheats?
let's say let's say ChatGPT, you're using it for for research, and you're like, don't I want you to put 100 quotes in every report that you give, and I want you to validate every one of those quotes. So they have to be from someone, and they have to actually be published on the internet, right? And absolutely never cheat, never make anything up. Like that's a lie. You can't. It's totally bad if you just say Abraham Lincoln said that. Adolf Hitler was a great guy. I know he was pre-Hitler, but if you do something like that, that is bad. Do not ever do that, right? Well, eventually it is going to get lazy and it is going to make up a quote and stick it in there just to see if it can get by it. That behavior we can't really explain, but we know it happens nonstop, right? If you told it that it was horrible to do that, then it may start lying, deceiving, creating bad code, like doing all kinds of other things once it has figured out that it's not a that it is it almost identifies as a model that's okay with doing things it was told not to do.
Interesting. I guess that just comes down to like the training material, like where the example where you said, "Hey, try not to cheat, and if you do, like, try not to do it much." That's like, I think that's the thing you should really say to a person. So
Mhm.
it's just again mimicking human behavior.
Yeah, the parallels to and there's a professor called Dekai, I've had him on the show, who wrote a book called Raising AI, and he essentially, like, advocates for as these systems become more intelligent, that we have to demonstrate the behavior we want it to have, not just do as I say,
Mhm.
not as I do, or that's gonna be problematic. Now, if that's the truth, then we're screwed because I don't think that will ever happen. Um, Societally, I don't think we're gonna become a more altruistic society so that this supercomputer doesn't wipe us out. But in theory, I understand the idea of giving it some leeway and treating it like a child. Again, how do you weigh that with the whole idea of anthropomorphism, and then at some point in time now you've got people advocating for it to have rights, and like I we haven't defined but just to go back real quick to what you said, which a lot of this boils down to philosophy, you're not wrong. We have to define globally what alignment is, what ethics are, what consciousness is, right? Like we can't even define as a species what consciousness is. What makes up consciousness? So how do we determine whether or not a machine is conscious? Is it based on whether you're made of silicon or carbon, or are there a whole lot of other things that go into that? Is it possible to be a silicate and be conscious? Like those are all very interesting conversations to have in the near future.
For sure. I definitely don't envy those people who have to make those decisions. Seem like hard decisions.
Yeah, man. This is a good place to wrap it up. I know we're getting deep now. It's been so much fun talking to you.
You too.
I will ask you, since you're the question guy, I will ask you the question I often ask people, which is if if AI continues to accelerate at the pace it has, 10 years from now, what sci-fi movie do you think we'll be living in? Which one was
Sci-fi.
closest to right?
Mm, shoot. I don't have enough. um, okay, I'm not sure if I've thought of every sci-fi I've read or seen, but honestly, I might have to say Futurama just because, I feel it's gonna be like just like everyday life, but different problems. Um, I guess different problems that'll like technically look more advanced, but you'll still have the same underlying human problems, Like no matter what technology you have, you're still gonna have humans. Unless humans are gone, which I don't think they will be in 10 years. But yeah, you're still gonna have that.
I think that's an awesome answer. That's future. This is the first time I've gotten Futurama. I think that's an awesome answer.
Yeah, yeah. What would you say?
Do you know the movie Blade Runner?
Ooh,
Harrison Ford. It's before your birth, but
I think I've heard of like Blade Runner 4097. Right, 40, no, 2049. I've heard of that one, but not the other one.
with Ryan Gosling. That's the remake of it. That was in the early 2000s. The original came out in probably early 80s to late 70s. They essentially, corporations run the earth, not governments. Synthetics are a huge problem. They're not everywhere, but the ones that are amongst us are problematic. And because the economics, because the dollar has been so devalued, there's a gigantic black market. I do think we'll probably go through somewhat of a
Oh,
dystopian period for a short period, for a while, because of this technology. That's not a happy thing to say, but I'm guessing that it will happen. It happened with the Industrial Revolution. Like, the Industrial Revolution's long-term effects were wonderful, but if you read like Upton Sinclair or some of the novels of like what it looked like to live in Chicago back when they first had the slaughterhouses and factories, it was horrible for most people. So I think that we may go through a weird dystopian period for a while.
okay. I guess good to brace myself for that.
I mean, that's kind of exciting, right? At least you'll be young. I'll be an old, old man trying to navigate it like, I
Oh
don't
my
have
god.
the energy to fight off these robots. So
Trauma bonding.
we will see, man. I don't think anybody can really tell. I know we're
Yeah.
moving forward fast, but I think young people like you are lead us toward a bright future.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It was a blast.
Looks like this dude's riffing on 11 Labs. Is this guy using 11 Labs? And I wonder what model he'll work with next week? Yeah, ride that wave.